Welcome to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive podcast with myself, Jack Bennett, and Emily Waters. Join us as we explore books, current events, history, politics, health, and more. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, are you ready for a deep dive into some poetry that'll really make you think?
I'm ready.
Today, we're going deep into Finding Comfort Within the Chaos, a collection of poems by Emery Rival.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is. Have you ever felt like life is just throwing everything it can at you all at once?
More times than I can count.
Well, this deep dive is all about finding the strength to not only get through those times, but actually grow from them. And Emery's life, their story is an incredible example of that.
It really is. To go through everything they did.
Exactly. And to use poetry to shine a light on how strong people can be, even when they're going through awful things, it's amazing.
Absolutely. It's like they're showing us that even when everything's falling apart, there's this part of us that can not only survive, but actually thrive.
Right. And Emery's childhood, it wasn't easy at all. Substance abuse, homelessness, things that would make anyone wonder if there's even any hope left.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. But then you read their poems and you see how they used poetry as this lifeline.
It's like their words are reaching out and pulling them up from the darkness.
That's a great way to put it. Emery's poems aren't just about expressing themselves. They're a way for them to work through all that trauma.
Right. Exactly. It's like when talking about it just isn't enough. When words fail, that's where the poetry comes in.
It makes you realize how powerful art can be, right? It gives a voice to all those things we can't put into words. And the way Emery organizes their book is so interesting. They have all these chapters named after flowers that bloom in the dark.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like finding beauty in the most unexpected places.
I like that.
Yeah. And the very first chapter, Queen of the Night, Dawn, it's like it sets the stage for the whole book. It's about finding these little glimmers of hope in even the darkest times.
It's like that saying, even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise.
Yes, exactly. And you can see that same idea in the poem Car Wreck.
Oh, tell me about that one.
Well, Emery compares substance abuse to driving recklessly.
That's a powerful image.
It is. And they don't just focus on the person driving the car. They make you think about everyone else on the road.
Right. The people around them. Like, how often do we actually stop and think about the impact our actions have on others?
That's what I love about this poem. Emery makes you confront it. They make you see how much damage addiction can cause and how those consequences, they just ripple outward and touch everyone.
It's true. Think about all the people affected by someone's addiction.
Exactly. And then there's Peaks, which looks at mental health in this really interesting way.
Oh, I'm always interested in poems about mental health. What's their take on it?
Well, they compare it to climbing a mountain.
Climbing a mountain?
Yeah. They're basically saying, look, you can't always be at the top. There are going to be times when you're down in a valley.
It makes sense. We can't always be on top of the world.
Right. But even in those valleys, there's still beauty to be found, right? Those little moments of peace, if you just look for them.
That's a good point. It's about finding those moments of peace when you're surrounded by chaos.
And that's such a huge part of being resilient, isn't it? Being able to find those quiet moments when everything else is overwhelming. Which, kind of leads us to Emery's experiences with homelessness.
Yeah, they write about that in the section called Unforgiving Streets.
Yes, it's really raw and honest. You really get a sense of what life on the streets is like. It's not easy to read.
I bet. What really struck me was, even in that kind of environment, Emery found things that motivated them to keep going, to try to build a better life.
It's like that basic human need for safety and just feeling like you belong somewhere. It can be such a powerful motivator, even when things are really tough.
For sure. It's like a tiny spark that just refuses to go out.
Exactly. And then we get to the chapter called Gardenia Detach, and there's this shift in the tone of the book.
How so?
Well, it starts to focus more on letting go, like detaching from all the things that are holding you back,
Letting go can be so hard, though.
It can be. But sometimes it's the only way to move forward. Think about it. Maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's a bad habit you just can't shake. Whatever it is, sometimes letting go, even though it hurts, it creates space for something new and better.
That's an interesting way to think about it. So what happens in this chapter?
Well, there's this poem called Freedom. It's all about celebrating sobriety, like finally breaking free from that weight of addiction.
I can only imagine how liberating that must feel.
It's like stepping into the unknown, ready to take back your life and figure out who you really are without the addiction.
And that journey, that process of figuring yourself out, that's a huge part of it all, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just about quitting. It's about self-discovery and growth, facing challenges, and celebrating every little victory along the way. And we see a lot of that in the next chapter, Mock Orange, wakefulness.
Wakefulness. So it's about becoming more aware.
Exactly. It's like waking up to reality, even when it's hard to face. And then there's this poem called Shallow Breathing that is just, it's heartbreaking.
What's it about?
It's about watching someone you love fighting for their life. Just that feeling of helplessness, wanting to do anything to make it better, but knowing there's nothing you can do.
Oh, wow, that's tough.
It is, but it's also so real, you know? It makes you realize how precious life is and how important it is to cherish every moment.
It reminds us to be present with our loved ones, especially during their struggles.
Exactly. And I think that leads us perfectly into the next chapter, which we'll talk about after the break.
It's amazing how Emery Rival can take these really painful experiences and turn them into poetry that's so powerful and moving. It's like they have this special talent for it.
It's like they're holding up a mirror and letting us see right into their soul, isn't it? And it's not just about focusing on the bad stuff. There's this thread of hope that runs through all of their work. It's like they truly believe that people can heal and change, even after going through incredibly tough times.
It's fascinating how they don't pretend that it's all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, their poems go back and forth between these moments of deep sadness and then these glimpses of hope.
Yeah, it's that push and pull that makes their work so real. Like they're battling with their past while still trying to reach for a better future.
And it's in that struggle that you really see how strong they are. Like they're refusing to let their past define them. Instead, they're using it to grow and change.
I love that.
There's this one line in the poem, Glimpses of You, that really stuck with me. Emery writes, I know we all didn't ask to be on this earth, but making the best of every day while we are here is better than living in constant misery. It's such a simple thought, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, it reminds us that even when life feels really hard, we still have a choice. We can either let it drag us down, or we can try to find some joy and meaning, even in the small things.
It's like taking back your power, you know?
Yeah.
Even when things are tough, we still have the power to choose how we react to things.
I love that, choosing how we react instead of just letting things happen.
Right. And that idea of choice, that's the first step towards making things better. And I think that's a big part of what Emery is trying to say. We can't control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it.
And speaking of how Emery expresses things, I'm so drawn to the way they use metaphors and imagery to talk about complicated emotions. Like, there's this one in the poem Desert where they talk about the Atacama Desert, you know, that super dry desert.
Yeah, I've heard of it. What about it?
Well, Emery talks about how after a rainstorm, the desert bursts into bloom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's this amazing image of resilience and renewal, like showing how even in the most barren and empty places, there's still potential for growth and beauty.
And they're comparing that to our own struggles. It's like saying that even when we feel totally lost and hopeless, there's still that chance for us to blossom and grow.
Yes. It's such a hopeful message. Like, even after going through really painful things, we can still heal and transform.
Right. And it's important to remember that healing, it's not always a straight line from bad to good. You know, it's not like that.
Yeah, there are going to be setbacks, moments when you doubt yourself, and times when it feels like you're taking one step forward and two steps back.
Exactly. And Emery's poetry doesn't try to hide that. It shows how messy and complicated healing can be. Like in the poem, Rewiring Yourself, remember that one?
Yes.
It's a great example of how changing the way you think and act, it takes time and a lot of patience and being kind to yourself along the way and messing up. It's a normal part of the process.
So it's not about being perfect.
No, not at all. It's about accepting that you're on a journey, you know, and committing to growing as a person, even when it's uncomfortable or scary.
It's like letting go of all that baggage we carry around, the bad relationships, the habits we can't break, those thoughts that just keep us stuck, even though it's hard to let those things go.
Yeah, it can be so hard to let go.
It can be. But when we do, it creates room for something healthier to come in. And it's not about placing blame. It's about realizing when something is no longer good for you and choosing to prioritize your own well-being.
That's a huge theme in the chapter Gardenia, Detached. Recognizing when it's time to create some distance, to step back from a situation that's causing more harm than good.
Like those relationships that are just toxic, you know?
Exactly. And Emery explores this in a really powerful way in the poem Breaking Shackles. It's about breaking free from those patterns of codependency. It's about finding the strength to take back your life.
It's so inspiring, that longing to be free, to be your own person, and to have the courage to step away from those patterns and really step into your own power. I mean, that's what it's all about.
And another thing that really struck me about Emery's poetry is how they talk about addiction. They don't sugarcoat it at all. In the poem My Secret, they straight up say that addiction is a choice.
That's a tough one.
It is. And I know it can be controversial to say that. We can't ignore things like genetics and trauma and all the other factors that contribute to addiction, that those things are really important.
But they're saying that at some point, even with all of that going on, a choice has to be made. Like, do you keep going down that same path, or do you reach out for help and choose a different one?
Right. And that choice, even though it can be so hard to make, that's the beginning of recovery.
It's like Emery is saying, look, you don't have to erase your past or pretend it never happened. It's about taking those experiences and weaving them into a new story, a story where you're stronger and more empowered.
Taking those broken pieces and building something new.
Yes.
And that's not always easy or pretty, right? There's going to be pain and struggle and times when it just feels like too much.
Absolutely. But even in those really dark moments, there's this spark,
Yeah.
this resilience that refuses to be put out.
And that's why Emery's poetry is so powerful. It doesn't shy away from the dark stuff, but it also shows us the light that can be found even in the deepest shadows.
It's like they're reminding us that we're not alone in this. We all struggle, and we all have the strength to overcome those struggles.
And it's so important to be kind to each other and offer support to those who are struggling.
Yeah, that human connection, that's what gets us through.
So before we move on, I want to ask you a question. How have you found comfort and strength during those times when life felt chaotic? What has helped you get through those tough times?
Emery Rival's finding comfort within the chaos has really been inspiring, hasn't it? I mean, to be able to take those painful experiences and create such beautiful and powerful poetry.
It's incredible. I'm still thinking about all the things we talked about last time.
Yeah.
The way they use their poetry to find healing.
Me too. And it makes you realize how strong the human spirit really is.
It does. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to talk about how we can all learn from Emery's journey, and maybe find ways to build up our own resilience.
I like that. Because it's easy to just admire Emery's strength from afar, but it's something else to actually try to apply their insights to our own lives. Like, how can we actually do that? What are some things we can take away from their poetry?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up in their work is the importance of being self-aware.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It's about really looking inward,
Mm.
Examining your thoughts and feelings and behaviors, trying to understand why you do the things you do.
It's like that saying, know thyself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when you understand yourself, like what triggers you and how you usually deal with tough situations, then you can start to make better choices about how you react when things get rough.
It's about being in control, right? Not just letting your emotions run wild.
Right. And it's not about beating yourself up over your mistakes or anything like that. It's about being kind to yourself and realizing that everyone's a work in progress. We're all constantly learning and growing.
It reminds me of that poem Phases, where Emery compares our emotions to the weather.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Sometimes our emotions are stormy and chaotic, and sometimes they're calm and peaceful.
It's a good analogy because it reminds you that it's okay to feel all kinds of emotions, the good, the bad, the happy, the sad. It's all part of being human.
Yeah. And what matters is how we choose to deal with those emotions. And sometimes dealing with them means asking for help.
Absolutely. Emery talks a lot about how powerful therapy can be and how important it is to reach out for help when you need it.
It's like they're saying it's okay to not be okay.
Right. There's this line from the poem Results that really stuck with me. It's hard to face what keeps you up at night, what looks back at you in the mirror every day when you are not kind, because all that's replaced that kindness up until now is anger. It's powerful. Because it's saying that it's hard to face those dark parts of ourselves, but there's healing to be found in that process.
It's like choosing to be kind to yourself, even when it's hard.
And, asking for help, it's not weak or anything like that. It takes a lot of courage to say, hey, I need some support. It shows strength.
And it's not just therapy. Emery also talks about finding healthy ways to cope with stress and surrounding yourself with good people who care about you.
Having that support system can make a world of difference.
I think of that poem Cinders, where they use the image of fire to represent transformation, like how fire can burn away the bad stuff and make space for something new and beautiful to grow.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It makes you think about how we can use our pain and our struggles to make ourselves stronger. Like maybe you channel those feelings into creative things or physical activity, or maybe you find peace in nature or by spending time with loved ones.
It's about finding those things that help you feel grounded and connected to yourself.
And it's different for everyone, right? There's no right or wrong answer.
Exactly. What works for one person might not work for another.
It's about finding what works for you, what makes you feel alive and connected to the world around you. And speaking of connection, something that really shines through in Emery's work is just how important human connection is.
It is. Even after going through so much pain, they still believe in the power of love and building strong relationships.
It's like they're saying that even though the world can be dark and cruel, there's also so much love and beauty if we just open ourselves up to it.
Exactly. It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about acknowledging the pain, but also making space for hope, for love, and for the possibility of healing and connection.
Yeah. And Love Anyway really captures that, doesn't it? Even though Emery has been hurt in relationships, they still choose to love. They choose to be vulnerable and believe in the power of connection.
It's such a powerful message. It's about choosing love over fear, even when it's hard.
And it reminds us that relationships can be tough sometimes, but there's always something to learn from them, even if it's just how to grow and be a better person.
It's about being willing to grow and learn together, both as individuals and as a couple.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into finding comfort within the chaos, what's the most important thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Well, I want them to remember that being resilient doesn't mean you're never going to feel pain or struggle. It's about having the strength to keep going, keep growing, and keep believing in a better future, even when things feel impossible.
It's about embracing the ups and downs of life and finding those moments of joy and connection along the way.
Emery's poems give us a guide for that journey. They remind us that even in the midst of chaos, there's always a chance for healing, growth, and transformation.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Emery Rival's work. I hope this conversation has been as meaningful for you as it has been for us.
It has been. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep searching for those moments of beauty and connection that make life so incredible.
Thank you for listening to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive Podcast. Emily Waters and I will see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.